everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We begin today with a progress report on Oklahoma's wheat crop. Here's our OSU Extension Specialist, Dr. Oliveira Silva, to talk about some of the challenges that producers are facing.
Yeah, so like you said, it's been challenging. It's been a challenging wheat season since planting, especially for dual-purpose producers who had a late start due to the lack of moisture in September. Fortunately, we got some moisture in October, which allowed us to have our crop established somehow in some forage growth. But then by December, I visited some wheat fields. We were already seeing signs of drought stress. And if you look at Mesonet for Oklahoma, most areas had not seen a significant amount of rain for 90 days. Last week's winter storm helped to improve some conditions in some areas, but some areas are still dry. And so as a result of all that, some producers grazed as much as possible, may have already removed their cattle from the pasture. Some did not have a chance to graze at all. And for producers who are still grazing, I would say just to be careful and watch for that grazing intensity. Leaving at least 60% of that canopy coverage will help the crop to recover from grazing, especially with the environmental conditions that we are now.
It's about time for first hollow stem, so get us up to speed on that timeline.
Yeah, so we are right now just starting to check for first hollow stem. We are seeing that some varieties are moving. And just to clarify, so first hollow stem, it's that stage that indicates the beginning of stem elongation, so right before, just before jointing. And it is a good indicator for when we need to remove our cattle from wheat pasture. And so, like I said, we will be collecting samples like we do every year, so twice a week. And we'll be monitoring for first hollow stem differences among varieties. So several factors can influence first hollow stem. So environmental conditions and varieties. And varieties, they can differ by as much as 3 weeks in reaching that first hollow stem. So we'll be collecting first hollow stem here in our plots, and those are ungrazed plants. So they will likely be a little bit ahead of producers' fields that are actually being grazed. And so the reason why we do here is to serve as an alert for producers. For varieties that reach first hollow stem first in our samples should be the first ones to be monitored in commercial fields. And Mesonet also provides a good first hollow stem tool for producers to look also for varieties different in immaturity to reach first hollow stem.
Give us an idea of what producers should be looking for as first hollow stem dates get closer.
Yeah, so just dig up some plants in an ungrazed part of their field. Look for that 1.5 centimeter of hollow stem below that developing head. So 1.5 centimeters, the same diameter of a dime. When plants are not at first hollow stem, it's more difficult to see, but when it is, it's very easy to see that hollow stem when you split the stem lengthways. So looking into that, it's very important because especially with the conditions that we are now that are not so favorable for regrowth, so grazing past that first hollow stem can lead to yield losses from 1 to 5% per day.
Let's talk about any disease or insect pressure. Are you seeing anything? Are you hearing anything from growers around the state?
I haven't seen or heard anything at all. Fall was very quiet, no diseases. Right now, I'm not seeing diseases, and for now, it's very quiet.
Thank you very much for the information, Amanda, and we'll see you again here on SUNUP in a couple of weeks. And now a word about nutrition needs for cattle as they're removed from wheat pasture. Here's Dr. Dave Lalman.
With the continued dry conditions, some folks are pulling the replacement heifers off of wheat pasture or may have already done so. And so if it's a spring-born heifers, we've got about 60 days now until the grass greens up and you can turn those heifers out. So we thought maybe it might be helpful to go over just some fundamentals to get those heifers from this point in time until green up, so 45 to 60 day period, and just assuming that most folks would have grass hay available, how much supplement might it require to get those heifers ready to breed this spring. So in general, I think one of the fundamental things is folks need to have a target weight for their heifers in mind. So do you intend to develop your heifers to the point where they're about 65% of their expected mature weight? Or is your program, your philosophy designed more around the lower input system where you target maybe 55% of their expected mature weight as their target weight by the beginning of that first breeding season? And so if you've got that target weight in mind, whatever your philosophy is, and if you can get a check weight on your heifers now, at the time you're having to pull them off of wheat pasture, you'd have a really good idea of what they need to gain between now and grass green up, or between now and the time you're ready to breed those heifers. That will determine the amount of supplementation. Generally speaking, good quality Bermuda grass hay and somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5 pounds of a 20%, 16 to 20% feed will allow those heifers to gain around 1.5 pounds a day. Another option might be about 3 pounds of rolled corn and 2 pounds of dried distiller's grains with free choice high quality Bermuda grass hay would allow those heifers to gain about 1.5 pounds a day. Obviously, the lower the quality hay that you provide for the heifers, the more supplement that will be required for them to meet your target rate of weight gain. For example, low quality native grass hay might require up to 7 pounds of supplement to get the heifers to gain 1.5 pounds. So, just keep in mind that you need to know what your target weight is at the beginning of the breeding season. Get an idea of what the heifers weigh now. That will allow you to calculate the amount they need to gain between now and the first of the breeding season. And then you can design your supplementation program around the hay quality that you have available and around the supplement choices or options that are available near you. Be sure to contact your local extension educator, and they'll be happy to sit down with you and work through those different scenarios to help you come up with a program that's cost effective and helps you achieve production goals on your replacement heifers.
Hello, Wes Lee here with the Mesonet Weather Report. Finally, a little bit of moisture was received statewide last week. Unfortunately, for most of us, it came in the form of a very dry, powdery snow. An old rule of thumb is it takes about 10 inches of snow to equate to an inch of water. That is only true when it falls when temperatures are near freezing. In colder conditions like this time, it takes many more inches to get an inch of water into the soil. This rainfall map for a week from Wednesday was mostly capturing the snow as it melted, with the exception of cold rains that fell in the far southeast. You can see the numbers were very small in most of the western counties where the drought is the most severe. This map is the 10-inch fractional water index before any of the snow fell. Great conditions in the east, but dire in most of the west. After the snowmelt, as seen on this map from Wednesday, you might be able to see some very slight improvements, but little to none in the worst drought-hit areas at this depth. I want to leave you with some hopeful news that next week will possibly have some rainfall in it, as seen by the green on this forecast map. Gary is up next with the monthly rainfall maps.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, I think the question on everybody's mind is how much did the rain, snow, and ice help? Let's take a look at the new map and we can find out. Well, the improvements on the new map are really confined over in far eastern Oklahoma where 1 to 2 inches of liquid equivalent precipitation fell. Now, some of that was rain, some of it was ice, some of it was snow. So we did see a reduction, especially down in LaFleur and McCurtain counties where we got rid of some of that even extreme drought, the red color. Now across the rest of the state, we were just on the borderline between making improvements, but we kept it status quo over much of that area simply because the deficits are just too much over the last 30 days to really up to 6 months. And we can take a look at that 30-day rainfall on the Mesonet maps. Here we see, this is mostly what came from this last storm actually, because we haven't had a lot of precipitation. And you can see those green areas over across far eastern Oklahoma. That's where we saw the improvements. Now when we got to those darker blues and lighter blues, we really just kept it more status quo, especially across west central Oklahoma where they've only had about 1/10 of an inch, so less than 1/4 inch of rain over much of that area, and really across much of the northwestern quarter of the state. But really nowhere across the western 2/3 of the state have gotten a lot of precipitation over the last 30 days. And over that 30-day period, everybody in the state has a deficit of some amount. Now it's more across the parts of south central Oklahoma, up into the central parts of the state, but everywhere has a deficit, so not enough to start making improvements on the drought monitor in those areas across the western 2/3 of the state where the deficits are so much larger over the long term. Now those longer term deficits are exemplified by the consecutive days with less than 1/4 inch of rainfall map from the Mesonet. Again, the western 2/3 of the state, much of that area goes from 90 to more than 160 days without 1/4 inch of rain in a single day, and that's indicative of the drought conditions across those areas. We have had some improvements in this map across the eastern parts of the state, but simply not enough over most areas. Okay, this first storm in February was a good start. Now we need a few repeat storms. We'd rather not have the ice, but some rain and even snow would help, and hopefully we can start getting those storms in succession as we start getting later into February and then into March when spring starts to come around. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Good morning, Oklahoma. Welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. This week's topic is hardware disease in beef cattle, or what we could call bovine traumatic reticuloperitonitis. How does this happen and how is it unique to cattle? Well, because of the way cows graze, using their tongue to pull in big chunks of forage, if we're out here in tall grass like this, if there's debris or some other kind of material in this grass, particularly something like sharp metal objects, they end up ingesting it without knowing that they're doing it. Particularly things like wire, screws, nails. If it's in our grass, if it's in a harvested forage or feed we're providing to cattle, what happens in the process of digestion is this metal object is heavier, and so it ends up in the compartment of the stomach we call the reticulum, and the rest of the lighter feed material passes on through the digestive system. Because of the anatomy of the reticulum and the weight of the metal object, it's a virtual guarantee that it's going to stay there forever and potentially cause problems. When this happens, muscle contractions, the digestive process, we end up with an irritation in the lining of the stomach or a puncture to the stomach wall. And if we get a puncture and a penetration, we end up with hardware down here potentially penetrating the sac of the heart. And so there are varying degrees of issues that hardware disease causes. It can be mild, it can be severe, it can be fatal based on what happens with these metal objects once they're in the reticulum. Hardware disease in cattle can be kind of challenging to diagnose. There's a variety of symptoms. Cattle with hardware disease are going to appear to be in pain. They're not going to want to move around, and sometimes when we get them to move, we'll actually hear audible grunting. They may stand with their head and neck extended out in front of them. We may just see a gradual weight loss over time in those cattle and they start to get a little unthrifty. If you're ever uncertain whether or not you've got or you're dealing with hardware disease, it's best to consult your veterinarian. And effective treatment is possible by feeding magnets and antibiotics, but you need to do that with a veterinarian's supervision. How do we prevent hardware disease? Again, something unique to cattle. We need to provide the extra management needed to clean up pastures, make sure there's not metal out there, make sure that we haven't got wire sitting around in the pasture that potentially gets ingested. We can put magnets in our feed mills, in our forage harvesting equipment, maybe in our cube feeder, but in doing so, try to prevent anything that is a potential cause of hardware from getting ingested by cattle. It's going to take some extra management to do it. We're going to need to invest that time and effort in keeping pastures and feedstuffs clean, but if we can eliminate the potential sharp metal objects, we go a long way toward eliminating the potential for hardware disease in beef cattle. Thanks for joining us on Cow-Calf Corner.
Dr. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, the USDA has released the latest WASDE. Let's talk about some of the changes that may have happened in supply and demand expectations.
Well, there's only minor changes, and you look at ending stocks for wheat, corn, and beans, they went up just a little bit. You look at the range of the pre-release estimates, they were near the top end of that range, but yet wheat prices, corn prices, and soybean prices all went up. Wheat and corn up 14 cents, soybeans up 26. Now at today's prices, the relatively high prices we got now, that's not very much, but still it's a positive price move with really slightly bearish numbers, but not many changes.
What is the market offering now for the different crops?
Let's use Medford, Oklahoma prices. Now Parrington's a little higher on the nearby price for wheat, and Snyder's a little lower. But in Medford right now, you can sell wheat on the cash market for around $7.85. If you're looking at June, July, the harvest period, around $7.90 for a forward contract. Corn, the current corn price, cash farm level price, $6.30. You can forward contract for 2022 harvest delivery at $5.60. Sorghum is $6.45 for the current price, $5.55 for the forward contract. Soybeans are up to $15.40 a bushel on the cash market. And for the 22 harvest, you're talking about $13.60. Cotton, $125 a hundredweight. That's what the futures price. The cash probably in Oklahoma around 121, something like that. And if you look out for the 22 crop, $105 a hundredweight for that cotton. So relatively high prices.
I think we all want to make sure we heard you right, especially on soybeans. Let's talk about the grain price expectations. How do those figure in?
Well, right now, if you read what the analysts are saying, they're semi-bullish for prices. I like to look at the futures market prices, say the KE price or the Kansas City hard red winter wheat price on the Chicago Board of Trade. The July contract at $7.50. The range is $7.50 to $8.50. It's up near $8 right now. But the March contract to the July contract is only 7 cents difference, plus 7 for July and plus 13 when you get out to December. So you only got a 20-cent price difference between March and December. So not much there. Corn, the trend is up. The range is on the futures market 610 to 640 on that March contract. You look at March to July, the difference in those contracts, 2 cents, 2 to 4 cents, something like that. But when you get out to the 22 harvest, you're down 80 cents. So they're looking at corn prices stable through July, August, September, and then falling off. Soybeans, no difference in the March and the July contract. But you look at beans, you go back to December, $12.40, $15.75 now. Uptrend there, and a strong uptrend and bullish. But you go out to harvest, you drop off $1.55. Cotton, $1.26 on March, $1.21 on July, $1.05 when you get out to December. So not much change there. So relatively high prices and not much change. Now when we say not much change, you're talking about plus or minus 50 cents to $1 for wheat and some variability around that. But relatively high prices are expected to stay here.
And let's talk about those high prices just a little more. Why are they so high?
Well, if you read the markets and what the analysts are saying, there's a shortage of everything. All the commodities, gold, copper, steel, wheat, corn, soybean, the ending stocks and the stocks are all lower. And you wonder what's going on there. It's because not only are people hoarding commodities, countries are hoarding commodities. Now, you don't necessarily see it in the stock levels because it's being held by the farmer or by the consumer, and those aren't for sale. And so I think it's a big problem right now is hoarding all across the market, and building those stocks to hoard has lowered our stock levels and voila, higher prices.
Do you think that this phenomenon, all the factors that lead into it, will continue?
Well, I'll say the news right now is saying that the people all around the world are getting tired of these rules and regulations for COVID. I think as we work through that, plus this last string of COVID wasn't as dangerous or wasn't as near as hard to get over as the past ones. I think we're moving on out of that. I think people want to get back to normal. It may take another year or two, but I think, and when we get back to normal and we start using up this stuff we hoarded, that price is going in the tank.
Yeah, it'll move in that direction then. Well, Kim, great information as always. We'll see you next week. Hi, I'm Dr. Kris Hiney, the Equine Extension Specialist with Oklahoma State University. Today we're actually going to be talking about the spring transition period in mares. So as you can see from our empty foaling stall, we're a little bit soon to be foaling mares out here at the farm, but a lot of people do start to think about breeding mares early, especially if you have mares that are producing foals. They'll be competing in futurities, being sold in auctions earlier in their life, or certainly in our racehorse industry. However, mares are essentially long day breeders, meaning that they don't really cycle regularly until the daylight is a little bit longer than what we have right now. So typically, breeders that are trying to get those mares to foal pretty early have to plan ahead and essentially start putting those mares under lights in November or December. So they put them under essentially big field lights or bring them into stalls with lighting. There's even some kind of cool devices where the mares wear a hood that essentially shines a light into their eyes. So all of those techniques can actually speed up that period of time when mares begin to cycle. However, we do want to remember that when mares do begin to start cycling or go into estrus, they have something that's called a transition period. What that means is the mare may be receptive to the stallion, she may be showing estrus, but she still isn't actually going to be fertile at this point in time. So really, the only way to know for sure when the optimal time to breed that mare is working with your veterinarian to palpate or do ultrasounds of that mare to determine the follicular size. For more information on breeding mares and mares in transition, you can visit OSU's Extension fact sheets, as well as check out our Extension Horses Tack Box Talk series, podcasts available everywhere. Talking broadband expansion now in Oklahoma, here's Dr. Brian Whitacre with an update.
You all might be familiar with the Infrastructure Act that passed late last year, but the awards that recently happened were actually not part of that. We're still waiting on those funds to come down. That probably won't happen for another year or so. But we have a couple of places in Oklahoma that are getting funding from an earlier version of a broadband federal program. So we have 2 electric cooperatives within the state who got a significant amount of money to run fiber broadband in parts of the state that they serve. And for those of you not familiar with what fiber means, a lot of our rural areas are stuck with DSL connections, which are pretty slow, maybe 3 megabits per second, 10 megabits per second. Fiber is going to provide up to 1,000 megabits per second, gigabit speeds, which is super fast. If you've been on a fiber connection, you'll never want to go back. So the 2 cooperatives that got awards are Cookson Hills Electric Cooperative, which is based out of Stigler, and so they're serving most of Sequoyah County, and they got about $4 million over a 10-year period. And you can find a map of their service area. If you get your power through Cookson Hills, you can be expecting a fiber connection to be rolled out within hopefully the next 4 or 5 years. And the other cooperative that got some broadband funding is Canadian Valley. They serve 10 counties in the mid-Oklahoma area, but they're mostly focused on Potawatomi, Seminole, and Lincoln for where they're going to roll out their fiber first. They have a nice map on their website as well showing their planned rollout of fiber. And so those are What we expect to see over, again, the next 4 or 5 years, those of you who get your power through those cooperatives can expect fiber broadband in the near future. So that's the first broadband related story. The second one is an update on a program we call the Affordable Connectivity Program. You all might have been familiar with the emergency broadband benefit that went into place last year, kind of as the pandemic was continuing. This is an update to that, and basically it'll give you, if you qualify for it, up to $75 a month to pay for your broadband connection. Most of Oklahoma is considered being located on tribal lands, according to the sponsoring organization. And so if you apply for this program and are eligible, you'll get $75 a month from the FCC to pay for your monthly broadband subscription. They also have a program that can help you, that will give up to $100 if you want to have a connecting device like a tablet or a laptop. And again, I encourage people to apply for this. Right now, they've actually boosted the amount of people who are eligible for this up to 200% of the federal poverty line. So for a family of 4, that's around $55,000. So if you're under that threshold, you can get your broadband costs paid for free for the foreseeable future. This program has a lot of money behind it, and it should last at least a couple of years. So we strongly encourage everyone to take advantage of that. And then the last story I have for you today deals with someone who you might know that has an old flip phone. Most of us with these regular phones, we can see we have either the 4G or 5G networks on them. Not everyone has upgraded to these nice smartphones. However, if you know someone with a flip phone that still says 3G on it, you might want to make them aware that those networks are being shut down in 2022. So the 3 major cellular providers, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, are all going to discontinue their 3G networks at some point in 2022, and they each have a list of the devices that are going to be affected on their website. So go to your local library, talk to your local extension educator. If you do have a flip phone that says 3G, you might be affected. So be aware of that. And those are the major broadband stories I have for you guys this week.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can see us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.